Please be seated.
It's not on.
Sorry. Sit at my right hand or my left. That's too loud, isn't it? Is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared. You will drink the cup that I drink. You will be baptized into my death. That's a hard answer. And where to find this place next to Jesus? So I read something I didn't know anything about, and his name I didn't know anything about, but a generation or so ago, Edmund Steinley was a well-known preacher who delivered brutally honest sermons. Sometimes people would stand up in the middle of his sermons and shout, "False prophet!" Through most of his ministry, he remained controversial, but he especially drew controversy in the 60s when everything seemed to be turned upside down because of war, protests, assassinations. It was in that time, we were still in Vietnam, he asked how we could find God in the midst of all this chaos. It's still our question, I think. Steinley answered that we could find God wherever people suffered. We agree that God cares for those who suffered, but here's the story he told. He told a story about some moment in the Vietnam War, and a Viet Cong soldier had been killed. And the soldier, American soldier, noticed that they were in his village and his widow was grief-stricken when he was killed. So that's where Jesus is to be found. Didn't say he was found in the middle of the war because it was a war or because he was in the middle of what this American had done, or certainly not necessarily about, well, is the Viet Cong guy any good or not? But the American pastor was saying that God comforted the widow of a Viet Cong soldier. To me, that brought to mind something very important that I've learned, but I don't always put it into practice. There is a way to incorporate our prayers with daily life, but perhaps daily life isn't the right word, because incorporate our prayers, and it's really good to pray a lot all the time, because when you need it, you can use it. But it was because in the various circumstances of our lives, including the ordinary mediocre ones, but it's also crises, I call it the call of God method. Because prayer is meant to take us into a deeper connection with God, and deeper than our awareness of our needs, or even the needs of people specifically that we can name. That's the beginning. But the habit of prayer teaches us to notice or discern God in relation to all these circumstances. And in every situation, we can make it a habit. What is God's call to me right now in this situation? This takes every kind of event in our lives and asks not, is this God's will? It asks, what is God calling me to do, to say, or just to be here? Jesus' answer to the disciples in today's gospel points us to, yes, God's will in all circumstances of the broken world. But God's will turns out to be his will for us. That is, what is God calling me to? It's a good habit to begin to cultivate, both in simple, everyday, boring things, become boring if we not let them, or in terrible situations. It's not that God wills those situations or wants those situations, but God does want us to hear a call from God in that. That's probably the answer that Jesus was saying to the disciples, James and John, like all of the disciples, foolish enough to ask our question and get an answer from Jesus. Amen.